The lack of awareness of child labour and child trafficking amongst police, social services, the UK Border Agency and the judiciary has seen countless children being mistreated and many being misguided in the help they need. Many children have been treated as criminals rather than being recognised as victims. While organisations like ECPAT advocate for better protection for trafficked children in the UK, there are still 100 million children worldwide under the age of 15 engaged in hazardous work. The International Labour Organization reports that Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest proportion, with over 40 million children involved in labour. I caught up with Betty McConey, Ambassador for the Women World Summit for the United Nations Children Campaign, to get an insight into the lives of these children.
First of all, we are looking at the equipment that children use. Some of them can actually overpower them and they get physically injured. We are also looking at the dangers of rape. Take, for example, myself, who went to vend on the streets at age 6, I was raped. Then we are looking at a child missing the whole childhood. Psychologically, it has got implications. A child develops through all stages of being looked after, cared for. So those are the children who develop into very violent adults later on.
Child labourers are exposed to many dangers, including having to endure beatings, humiliation and sexual violence by employers. The impact of working in such perilous conditions can have lifelong consequences. 7-year-old Yila gets ready for school. His education is paid for by the daily work he does at Godrich Stone Quarry. Yila's father was forced out of school aged 13 when rebels attacked his village during Sierra Leone's brutal civil war. He and many others were forced to flee to Freetown for safety. If Yila didn't work, he too would have to drop out of school.
Each quart contains 2 pints also. So if you have 5 quarts, we'll give you how many pints?
Sierra Leone has one of the lowest literacy levels in the world. Only 54% of school-aged children can read. With their families living in poverty, these children have no choice but to work in order to get an education. Roslyn Oakbao, a social worker, has been working with this community for 4 years. She's been trying to encourage families to save money collectively and invest it as a group to secure the future of their children.
How you feel? Where you work with your papa?
I don't feel fine.
You know they feel fine? What you know?
Brookstone.
The Brookstone in Heart, eh?
Yeah. I got my papa for Brookstone, but we signed the pool to school fee.
You know easy. Now when I'm on and the chance no day. If chance the person can find himself now.
Coming out of a brutal civil war, life is challenging for the people of Sierra Leone. Children like Yila have very few options in their life, so have to work to supplement their parents' efforts. The money they make is used not only towards their education, but to pay for food, clothing and medical needs. Despite the harm to children, for many working is not an option, but a necessary means of survival.
The main problem with child labour is the effect on the children's development. So first of all, when they're working very hard, they're not able to go to school, they're not able to learn. Secondly, they could be working in dangerous situations which can be directly harmful to their health through pesticides, often through abusive relationships at work or through working with very dangerous machinery. And thirdly, it takes away children's space for play and for development with their peers.
Pesticide poisoning is one of the biggest killers of child labourers. Children working in prostitution, mining, aluminium and fireworks manufacture can lead to numerous health concerns, including sexual transmitted diseases, mutilations and psychiatric disorders. Widespread long-term health problems contribute to lower productivity, thereby negatively impacting a country's economic growth.
The biggest impact on the economy from child labour is to do with how child labour affects children's development. So when these children are not able to learn, when they're having difficult health situations, and when they're maybe abused in various ways through child labour, it means that when they grow up to be adults, they're unable to contribute to the economy, to society as productively as they would otherwise have been able to. So they don't have the skills, they don't have the health, and they don't have the confidence and capacity to contribute to the economy. Children working at low wages may mean for some employers that they don't need to buy capital, so they don't need to buy the machines that could do the job more efficiently in the long run.
Child labour came under the spotlight when developed nations realised the consequences of minors working for little or no money. Children working not only contribute towards keeping labour costs low, but they also compete with working adults both locally and globally. Businesses are always looking for cheap ways to produce goods and keep up with competition and consumer demands. And multinational companies quite often use low-cost labour from developing countries that employ children.
They definitely have a part to play. I think they must put their house in order. They must stop with child labour.
Yeah, I think so. From what you read in the news, you know, especially you hear a lot about clothes manufacturers, especially.
I think they are, because of cheaper costs, so they have a bigger part to play with.
The moral responsibility of setting standards of ethical means of production not only lies with local government, but also with those who utilise labour from developing countries.
We only have to look at what happened in the industrial accidents in Bangladesh recently, in the garments factories previously in Pakistan and other countries. But the most high-profile accidents have been the recent ones. Over 1,000 people have lost their lives because of unethical activity by businesses. Now, Western businesses are complicit in this. Consumers, we as consumers can make a difference by demanding that the companies that have trading relationships in countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan apply pressure on the governments of those countries, that they do the due diligence to make sure that the building and infrastructure standards are decent, so that you don't have buildings collapsing because people are illegally building floor after floor and putting people's lives at risk, and that there are proper fire and safety regulations. It's scandalous that in the 21st century you've got that arrangement.
Conscious consumerism gives us, amongst other choices, the options of boycotting products of child labour. Although a well-placed intention from those in industrialised nations, it could in fact push children into worse forms of labour.
Yes, it is, because it gives other people an excuse to continue to do it.
It is wrong, but at the end of the day, the child doesn't have no other ways or means of supporting the family, so sometimes they get forced into doing this. But overall, it is wrong.
Yeah, but that's a difficult question.
If they are the only person who can earn money for that family, then that shows that something's wrong with that society. And at the very least, if they are going to do that, they should be paid a fair wage, and I doubt they are.
Legislations across the world prohibit child labour, but it's the lack of implementation of these laws and a lack of alternative opportunities which forces children into working illegally, then having to deal with the insecurities of the situation. Governments have been criticised for failing these children by choosing to turn a blind eye, making this an open secret. This exacerbates the problem as there's no one to regulate the work the children do or the environment in which they work, leaving them at the mercy of their employers. Is the solution to eliminate child labour itself, or should we be focusing on the causes of it?
You have to make sure that families in developing countries have the opportunity to earn a decent income, to build their own enterprises, through microfinance and other initiatives, but also they get the support so they can be lifted out of poverty, so that they don't have to send their children into work out of desperation.
Any attempt to deal with child labour must start by dealing with the poverty that causes it, so supporting poor households with livelihoods and with jobs and with transfers. Trying to push children out of their jobs can just result in pushing them into more damaging jobs, so for instance, leaving a cotton field and going into prostitution.
We should have rules like how many hours a child can work. And then what we want to see the safety measures that are taken to protect children. But I am advocating for school. Children should labour in school for their education. rather than to labor for someone exploiting them.
In an ideal world, children wouldn't need to or be coerced into employment. However, global factors such as lack of investment in public sectors, poor education, and other barriers to social mobility dictate that some children must work in order to live. Just as industrialized nations historically have been through a process of economic reform, which saw not only a transformation in the workplace but in the workforce, so must developing nations in this day and age. Similarly, there needs to be a shift in cultural beliefs that rationalize children working. With globalization, we live in a very small world where the moral complicity of individuals, organizations, and governments needs to be further highlighted before the plight of future generations of working children can be adequately addressed.